my mind is always thinking of what I'm gonna learn. And yesterday, read a very detailed email, and I know in that transaction there's a combination of about 30 years of real estate involved, and I was left with like, that's really a regulation. And I'm talking about the other agent. He's like 30 years in the industry. I'm 12. So imagine the experience, and for us not to have um, not that we didn't have the knowledge, it's just that we've never encountered that situation because it's so random. But as we move on in this market, stuff is going to come up. And right now, I have to still finish what I'm doing and solve this. But the seller is out of town. Buyer had already made all the arrangements to move into the property, right? Client is like moved on, because that's going to happen to you guys. That's just the reality of stuff. People are going to request to move into something that they're purchasing because either the lender took too long, the bank didn't fund it, something happened, am I right? So in this case, the buyer tells the seller, hey, the house is empty, COVID-19 hit, let us do a rent back while we close the escrow. Does that make sense to you guys? Sounds like something normal, right? So things with the first loan fell apart. It was a very big issue. We submitted the whole transaction. They're in there. All of a sudden, we're getting closer to the closing date, which is this Friday. And we find out that if there is a rent back for over a specific period of time, the actual buyer, who is now the tenant, needs to be at the property for 6 months. So, do you guys understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, tell me, I want to make sure you guys get it. Tell me what you guys get out of that. Like, what's going to happen now? Just like real estate talk. And then you guys could ask me questions so that I can be quiet and then go to Pastor.
So I think like if what you're trying to say is that if for some reason it doesn't go through or anything, he has 6 months to stay in there still before.
No.
Don't do a rent back to buyer and escrow before the funds.
No, what I'm trying to say is that if you're going to do a rent, like if you were buying a house from me,
Right.
and I was not living in the house, because there's a lot of homes that are vacant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, hey, your house is vacant, we're going to close escrow, we're confident, let me rent it from you while we close the escrow, right?
Oh, okay.
So they rented it, but as we're getting closer to the closing, an underwriter said the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac regulation is that if there's any type of relationship as renter to landlord, it becomes more like a arm's length transaction. So they're like, the client either has to come in with 15% down, which is like they're FHA buyers, with the hard they can get 15% down. But do you guys see how if the 30-year extremely seasoned top producing agent would have gone through that before,
You would have caught it.
he would have caught it. Or maybe he just wasn't paying attention. I know, to me, I will fold immediately, and I'll tell you, I have never encountered this scenario where now the bank is saying, hey, let's take a step back, they need to be renting for 6 months. Does that make any sense? So this is something that when we're in a mastermind setting, these are topics that you want to bring up because they go unsaid. And the whole point of mastermind is to learn so that when you're talking to your customers, you have the confidence to show up and know exactly what you're talking about. So since you guys aren't getting comfortable in your own skin yet, let me tell you another thing. So yesterday we went to go take the listing on Noble, and tell me why we went the day before, gave them a day of thought, as we typically do as a presentation. Went tomorrow, there was another sign already across the street with another listing agent. So what I'm saying is that it's very true. Where one person buys, 2 or 3 or 4 other people will want to also buy just because of the spark and confidence. We just have to find a way to get ourselves in front of those people. Here's my train of thought. If you know you have a buyer, how many of you guys are struggling with a buyer where you're looking at properties and you can't find the property because inventory is so low? Like you just can't. And I know you guys talk about property all the time, but if I'm looking in Silmar and they're pre-approved for 525, I'm like, you're not going to find anything. Like, yeah, I mean, am I talking normal stuff here? If they're in Silmar and they want something nice, they're going to be like 650, 620. 3-bedroom, 2-bath, might need a little TLC. So if you have that ability to, like, if you have that power in your hand, you're walking around with a $750,000 check on your hand. Your job is to make sure that you hand that $750,000 check to somebody that's going to exchange their title deed. They're going to move out of their house for your client. Why do we stop calling people if the offers are at that ridiculous amount? I know a bunch of people that if you tell them, hey, 690 next door to you, your little crappy 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,100 square foot home. You guys do the math, how much the square foot is selling for? I would pull out immediately in this marketplace, because people always want to spark up the, how much am I going to get? What's my net? What am I going to get? Does that make any sense? So that's why people always ask, how come is it that you put together all of these deals that become off market and you're just selling them and transacting them? Because you're always a step ahead. If I know I have a good list of buyers, why am I not focusing my time on calling people, telling them, hey, you might want to sell. I have this legitimate qualified buyer that's willing to buy. Spark the interest, spark the conversation, and then execute, because everybody wants the money. But it's just our perception. Like me, you give me a 750 buyer, I feel like I'm walking around with a $750,000 blank check that I'm going to write to any seller that I'm going to match make with. So you guys have to have that concept, and if you embrace that culture, then you're going to be like, wow, I could go up to a person and it's like, I'll give you 750 for your house. Like I walked up to the lady yesterday and I'm like, I already have an offer for you at 580. She's like, what? I'm like, she's like, everything's going so fast. Like, yeah, I've already been working with these buyers. Like, but it's a whole portfolio of people that you guys are starting to build, so you guys can match make. If you guys are auto-suggesting the deals, tell me why it happens to be that. For me, the deal happens right there and I make the match because I'm constantly auto-suggesting, like, hey, I'm gonna get this deal, this person's gonna come. And then I'll just develop, somebody hit me up on Facebook, send me a message, I want to get qualified. Tell me why he lands here yesterday. He brings all his financial documentation. And tell me why the amount that he qualified for was 580. What are the chances of that? But it's all in auto suggestion. So today, this is what I want to wrap up with. Yes, Steve.
I wanted to ask you something since we were.
Go for it.
I have like an important phone call I have to make today. I wanted your insight on it. So
yeah, share with us.
It's one of those tricky escrows I've been having. I mentioned it a couple times before where I had to give the notice and the demand to close escrow.
Yeah.
And they finished all the inspections. I think they wrapped up everything yesterday. We were supposed to close on the 29th of last month.
Right.
And so one of the things about this property is that there is a notice of violation from the building and safety department for unpermitted structure.
Okay.
And what we said before was, hey, we'll pay that $1,400 fee that has to be paid because of the ticket, whatever, for having that structure.
Violation fee.
Yeah, violation fee. And then you guys can deal with taking down the structure and getting that violation off. Pretty much you will assume the violation because, I mean, to have the inspector come down and get that violation taken off, it's going to be another month or two, and we don't have that time.
Right.
And now they're saying like, oh, are you gonna, like they said fine with that. Now they're saying, oh, but you're gonna destroy the structure yourself. So I'm gonna have to call them today and let them know like, hey, I mean, not to mention also we have a backup offer with the same price. Like we gave you the notice and demand to close. It's pretty much like, hey, either you take this offer or we're just gonna have to cancel.
Okay, so this is one thing that I want to take a step back in just in the setting of a mastermind. A checklist would have avoided that. Like, well, let me ask you a question. Is there a notice of substandard recorded against the property? Like when the preliminary title report comes up, is there a notice of substandard on there? Yeah, so a notice of substandard is basically when the Department of Building and Safety identifies an unpermitted structure, a structure that's not sound, like for anybody to occupy it. So what they do is they'll go file a notice of substandard. So write that down actually, because you guys need to know this. Like I'm going through this a lot. And the Department of Building and Safety guys is going after these notice of substandards. You know why? Because they came out with the accessory dwelling unit law. If you guys don't know about the ADU law, you guys need to Google it, read it. This is like, that's where the money's at. ADU, accessory dwelling unit. I love that one, actually, it's my favorite. But when the Department of Building and Safety files a notice of substandard, the notice of substandard automatically goes and gets registered against the deed of the property. Notice of substandard gets recorded. For the guys that are doing the real estate licensing, what liens are number one position? Tax, and then after, municipal ones. The municipal ones. So that's considered a municipal one. So unfortunately for your seller, if there's a notice of substandard filed on that preliminary title report, it does not matter who's willing to pay for the fee and who's going to do the demo work. The problem that you're going to have is that the inspector is going to require for him to do the inspections and for you to pull all the necessary permits if it's a demolition type of job before he releases the notice of substandard. So your negotiation should be who's going to do all the pre-work prior to it, because this issue is going to happen with any buyer that comes in. It's not that specific buyer and whatever they're doing. This is a seller issue. The seller needs to make sure that they can hand a title that's free and clear of any encumbrances. That's an encumbrance.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense to you?
So the notice of substandard, is that a different notice, like from the notice of violation? Is that two whole different things?
No, well, typically there's a notice of substandard, then the notice of violation comes after. First, they put the property and then the notice of violation, and that's where that $1,400 fee. But they're going to want it brought up to code in order for them to release the notice of substandard. Does that make any sense?
So can you have one and not the other? Can you have a violation and not a you gotta have both?
Yeah.
Okay, I understand.
They follow. So the reason I said about a checklist is if you would have gone if you have the checklist, pull a prelim. Actually, let me encourage you to do this. Just grab a checklist, even though it's really far into the process, it doesn't matter, just so you can see how properly it gets done. Then let's look at the prelim, and I'll show you, like, we could have avoided a lot of it because the notice of substandard shows up there, but it's just, how do you know what you're looking for? You know what I mean? So it's a good learning experience for you.
Yeah, the prelim is kind of difficult to go through, just so much.
Yeah, I'll teach you guys the prelim line by line. Like, do you guys know Carfax? Have you guys seen the Carfax report?
Mhm.
Yeah, do you guys know what the Carfax report is?
Carfax?
That's a what?
Carfax?
Carfax? It's not Fax.
Yeah, but they call it Carfax. It's more
Oh,
catchy.
Thank you, Adam.
Adam.
Wow, bro.
It's just depending.
That's what the title report is. It's gonna guarantee any of the stuff. That's why they do the statement of information and all that stuff.
But what would you suggest? Should I just tell them, hey, we're gonna pay the fee, and if you guys don't wanna go with fixing it, then just cancel it? Because we have the option to cancel right now,
Yeah,
and we have a backup offer.
but your backup offer is still gonna deal with that same issue.
Yeah.
So you're better off solving it for the sake of you making your commission immediately. I would just solve the issue right there, and then you need to tell the seller, hey, this is really your responsibility. Unless the buyer's getting that type of a deal and you guys would have properly disclosed it from the beginning, then it would be different. But at this point, I think I would tell the seller to pick up the whole tab.
But what about like the time frame of how long it will take to demolish that, have the inspector come by and get all that done? It's another.
You can't avoid that because if there's already that notice, it's on title. And if it's on title, when you get to the closing table, the escrow officer, and I'm surprised the escrow officer hasn't caught it yet. Who's the escrow officer? Is
Joseph with Precision.
Okay, let's call him.
Yeah, I spoke to him, but it was like mentioned to me like later on, like already close to closing, so I get it.
All right, let me get involved with that, just because I have some reservation. I want to make sure that it gets done properly. Who's your title officer? Is it Omar Kuba?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I would be what county is it in?
It's in LA.
LA. Okay, I would be very surprised if they didn't notice, do a notice of substandard. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
I'll wrap up with this. Let's preview properties because we got to get on the phones right now. Preview properties, follow up. Preview properties, follow up. Preview properties, follow up. Remember that the fear of being poor is the fear of, like, might as well just check out mentally. That's what the book said. You know what I'm saying?